Welcome back to our discussion, Modernizing the Financial Regulatory Environment, Lessons Learned, sponsored by Appian here on Federal News Network. My guests today are Blake Templeton, the Chief Product Officer at Groundswell, and Kyle Thomas, the Industry Lead for Public Sector at Appian. I'm Tom Temin. And Kyle, we're going to go to you again here. Talk about the fact that in this integrative effort, you have many workflows that might be similar in investigations or oversight of financial institutions. But how do you retool in such a way that these systems that were coded in different eras, in different languages, and maybe with different missions in mind, how can they be integrated into a system that everyone can share in and yet still retain what they need for their own mission? Sure.
Well, I'll speak to the business side of this because that's kind of my background. I'm not a technician by trade. From the business side, what's driving this is over the last couple decades, each of these agencies have developed their own homegrown systems like you've described. They tend to not talk to each other very well. They often have disparate data sets. And from an end user perspective, as someone who's doing the work of supervision, that becomes difficult. You've got lots of different data sets and you're logging into lots of different solutions and systems. And technology just doesn't work that way in other areas anymore. And the younger generation coming into this profession, I think, is expecting a more seamless, a more intuitive experience, one place to go to do the work that they're doing supervising these companies. And so that's really the business driver behind it. The other part of this, I think, that's driving it is by having one holistic view of a company from a regulatory standpoint, you develop a much tighter system of regulation around that company. It becomes more difficult for something to get missed from a regulatory perspective. You got one place to go and everybody's looking at the same screens. It's telling a consistent story. So that's, I think, really what's driving it from a business perspective. And we've seen platforms, low-code platforms like Appian really deliver that seamless, uniform experience and one look at a company, regardless of where the underlying data sits.
All right, but Blake, nevertheless, the languages of coding are different. The logic systems are different. Somehow, that gets down to some really nitty-gritty to be able to pull together. You've done it at the state regulatory level. Can it happen at the federal level, and what's required technically?
Yeah, it definitely can, and it's actually happening right now at the federal level as well. So we're working with the Federal Reserve Board of Governors to build a very similar system to the system at CSBS. And Appian really has several major advantages, but ones that come into play for this use case is the inherent low-code nature, and the entire platform was built to be used in an agile methodology for a build-out. And so what that means is, while you've got all these disparate systems that are built on all the different technologies, instead of pulling those technologies together, trying to integrate the bad, that's not what you're forced to do. You can keep what you want and the good and integrate those systems and those data sets, but you can also quickly get rid of all that technical debt, get rid of all of those things where, we can't do this because of this, put it onto a low-code platform in a very agile way. So build it quickly, develop it, get it in the user's hands. Over a course of 2-week sprints, you're developing what you've built, getting rapid feedback so that all of the different states have their chance to weigh in, make sure it's not only meeting the standards, but the state-specific desires and requests as well. And that's done from that agile component. Another major piece of this is Appian's ability to really be a single pane of glass for all of the users and a system. So just because you're leveraging Appian doesn't mean that you need to put everything that you have on the Appian platform. And one of the things that Groundswell really emphasizes is we want to help our customers make the most of their investments. So if they've got good investments that they already have in place, it's not a message of you need to put everything on Appian. It's we want to have Appian support you where you need it, and we want to use Appian to bring the data and the processes together in that one interface so you don't have 50 tabs open on your computer. So leverage those assets, bring them together through integration, through this single pane of glass view with Appian. Some of the systems are built in Appian, some of those systems that you love are built in other technologies, giving you that maximum for your investment.
Interesting. So you replace that legacy code with a new system, in other words, a new runtime system, and yet all the logic you had is still preserved.
Exactly. So we're replacing the parts that are going to be more efficient, need to be improved, but we're also leveraging those pieces that are still valuable and don't need to be replaced. A lot of times systems will come in and they'll say, we just need to replace it all, right? And the bill just gets higher and higher and higher. So we're giving you the option and the best of both. Leverage what you have that you like for things that maybe are coming to end of life, maybe are too costly to maintain, or you just need to go in a different direction. You're putting those on the platform. But then the platform holistically is through a data fabric, taking all of those different systems and bringing them together for the end user.
Okay, well, let me ask you guys this question in reverse then. We've been talking about integrating existing systems so each institution that is doing oversight, state or federal level, continues with its mission in the way it's done, only they can see what everyone else is doing and people can see what they're doing. What about the possibility of this revising the regulatory process itself? In other words, a business process re-engineering could arise out of this instead of replicating in new code and in an integrated system what we're already doing, sometimes maybe since 1890.
Yeah, I grew up on the farm, and we call that paving the cow path. So we don't want to pave the cow path here, and by that I mean, as these agencies go through this modernization journey, a natural outcome of that, if it's done correctly through a low-code and an agile process like Blake's describing, is that you identify parts of the workflow that you just don't need to do anymore. You identify things that are obsolete, and you identify lots of steps that you could do more efficiently, or you can automate through machine learning, intelligent document processing, or what have you. And that was certainly the experience that we went through when I was working at CSBS, was as we went through our modernization journey and we're building out this platform that Blake's describing, we did identify a lot of steps in the supervision process that we changed. And we wrote into the new system and the new application differently than what we had been doing previously. So we didn't just repave over that old path. We completely revised the way supervision happens and took better advantage of the modern technology and the data. So that's the way I see it. And I think as other agencies begin to go through this journey, I think we really need to be looking at ways to share data across them and create kind of an underpinning of data that everybody contributes to, everybody benefits from, because that does create that full holistic view of the financial services ecosystem in a way that we've just never been able to do before.
And I guess when you have data in that form, Blake, you've got the opportunity for applying artificial intelligence to it, all sorts of new applications, in addition to maybe modernizing the cow paths or straightening them and then paving them.
Yeah, so giving you a whole new art of the possible lets you actually take the time where you were doing those mundane activities and really start to leverage your data, explore the power of your data, and then use technology to harness that and then make your decisions much more impactful. So when you're gathering data across multiple different exams, in the system, not only can you do a joint exam, but you can also kind of share your exam with another regulator to give them insight into what's happened with that financial institution. So you have the ability to do that to maybe better inform them as part of the process. So really sharing out what could be very meaningful to save time as part of the exam, what are areas maybe to focus on, or highlighting areas of concern potentially to also fine tune the resources to the most efficient place possible. And then in addition to that, as Kyle was mentioning with things like the loan file reviews, what happens now is it's really a small subset in a batch that gets reviewed because that's what they have time to review. With machine learning, artificial intelligence, the goal is to get to a place where we don't have to do small batches anymore. Maybe we're doing larger and larger batches, and then maybe it's all the files because it's done through artificial intelligence, and all of the different knowledge is then shared out into workflows. When it finds a problem, it says, okay, this is an irregularity. I'm not sure it's a problem, but let's kick it to a user through a workflow and have them take a closer look at it. And that, instead of giving us a small sample set where we may find a problem, we may not, it lets the artificial intelligence point us into those areas. Doesn't mean we shouldn't also do a little sampling as well, but it's going to make better use of our time and I think really protect consumers longer term in a much better way.
And in the biggest sense here, the Government Accountability Office has stated, they've had reports saying that financial regulation has got to move up a notch in sharpness in order to protect the financial stability of the economy. Final comment on that and how maybe these platforms can serve that larger goal.
Certainly. I think one is that we have to recognize, and I think everybody in this space does recognize, that it's not going to stay status quo. The industry is changing. The risks that the industry is getting into, the products and services that they're offering are changing. That means the regulators have to be more nimble. And that's a key advantage of a low-code platform like Appian, is that once you build out a solution to facilitate some aspect of the work that these guys are doing, it will inevitably need to change. And the old way of doing business with old software was a very long, tedious, expensive process of making those changes. With a low-code platform like Appian, you can tweak and make those changes on the fly almost, and almost overnight you can see the results of the new workflow in your end users. And so that keeps the regulatory base very nimble. The other piece of this that I would kind of close with is breaking down silos. By bringing all the participants in this ecosystem onto one platform, you begin to break down those silos. And if you look at it like the regulatory ecosystem as a puzzle, each regulator's got several or one piece of this puzzle. By breaking down those barriers and bringing everybody onto a single platform, you can put all those puzzle pieces together and finally get that glimpse of the entire financial services market in one space. And I think that only becomes possible through a low-code platform like Appian.
All right, well, we've covered a lot of ground. I'm afraid we're out of time, and you've given us many, many good ideas, I think even outside of the financial framework for the federal government and state and local government. So thank you very much. My guests today have been Kyle Thomas, he's the industry lead for public sector at Appian, and Blake Templeman, the chief product officer at Groundswell. I'm Tom Temin. You're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, please visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Appian.